This is the West Michigan Sports Show, presented by Dasos Digital. Now, here's your host, Brandon Wirth.
It's the dawn of a new day here on the West Michigan Sports Show, presented by our great friends at Dasos Digital, real business solutions in the digital world. Brandon Wirth joining you here on News Radio WBRN. We got another banger episode for you here today. For those joining live over the airwaves, you might not have seen the title of this episode. All of our post-produced peeps, they already know, and unfortunately, I can't spoil them, but I can spoil the title for all of our on-air peeps. We are talking about rule changes once again, but not the MHSAA rule changes, the National Federation of High School Sports rules changes, some that have already happened, some that may happen, and some that I now will predict will happen, what they mean for the sport, and what does that mean moving forward. We'll break down all of that here on this episode, and I can't wait to get it in because there are a couple that I feel very passionate about, especially going back to the MHSAA rule changes, and there are some that need to be addressed for not necessarily what the verbiage is, but what they entail moving forward, because I don't think that is given enough thought moving forward. But before we get into the episode, big thanks to our sponsors. Those include Johnson's Automotive, the Schuberg Insurance Agency, Alter Care Big Rapids, Quality Car and Truck Repair, Moda the Macasta Osceola Transit Authority, Parasol Sales and Service of Big Rapids, and our great friends at Macasta Osceola Career Center. Thank you for your support of the West Michigan Sports Show. You guys have always stayed with us, and we appreciate all that you do for making this show possible. So there you go. Big thanks to them. If you want to be a sponsor on this show, I love to get you a part of the West Michigan Sports Show family. You can reach out to the Big Rapids Media Network, Big Rapids Radio Network here on 16 Mile Road in Big Rapids, or you can give us a call online. You can go to WBRN.com, the Contact Us part at the end of the More tab, and you can get in touch with one of our sales associates, and we would be glad to take your call and get you here on our show with us, because we have so much great support for high school sports in this area, and it truly means a lot to see all of our great sponsors working with us and just helping us make a great show. But without further ado, let's get right into it here, and we're talking the rule changes coming up for the NFHS year of 24-25, and there's a couple that will be making changes here very quickly here. A lot of these rule changes were announced at the later part of June as well as earlier on in May. So we'll kind of dissect them sport by sport. Some of the notable ones, we will not get to all of them just because there are so many. And frankly, there's some that really don't need to be mentioned because the verbiage, one, is too kind of confusing to understand to the public eye, or just have really no relevance to the game itself, but more or less recording and really kind of monitoring and administering the game, which we're going to have ball games. It really doesn't matter how it's necessarily administered, whether it's putting it through A to B or A, B to C to D. Doesn't matter. The game's still going to be played, so those really aren't relevant to you guys, the fans. But there are some where you watch the game and you'll say, whoa, that's new. I don't remember that. Those are the ones we're covering today. So we're going to start in basketball, and this is kind of where I got the idea of going back to this episode, because I know, of course, we talked about rules in the MHSAA and a lot of the ones that are changes, and we went over the good and bad ones. But the NFHS is obviously the national, right? MHSAA is Michigan, the state legislature, and administers of the high school sports here in the state. But the NFHS is national, United States. You might recognize the name because that is the streaming platform you probably watch a lot of games on if you are away from home. But there's some in basketball here coming for 24-25 that will be made. And one of them is very interesting. It comes with a role for an Oscar performance, and many people know where I'm going with this. It's flopping. Flopping is one that has started to become a prevalent problem, not only in the high school circuit, but also the college and professional circuit. Of course, you always see the drama on the floor. So how should it be administered? How should it be addressed? And how should there be discipline with it? The NFHS is electing to make a fake foul, or quote unquote flopping, being a player simulating being fouled or making a, here you go, theatrical or exaggerated movement when there is no illegal contact. So what is the rule going to be? Well, they are going to say that it's now going to be made a technical foul, but not a player technical. Interesting, right? So the new language is now establishing a procedure for officials to issue a team warning the first instance. So there will be a warning if a flop is detected by the officiating crew. They're going to go right down to the coaches. They're going to say, hey, your team, they're starting to flop, knock it off. After then, it is going to be an additional instance, as it's labeled in the actual verbiage, and it will be resulting in a team technical foul, but not a player technical foul, which it was previously quoted also as a personal technical foul. So that's not going to be the case, which brings a very interesting idea into play on how teams will strategize the way that they will foul later on in the end of games. Because, let's be honest, there are different ways that you can draw contact in the sport of basketball. So that's going to be one of the big rule changes. What are my thoughts on it? I think this is a fair way to do it. I personally liked when the personal foul was attached to it as far as the technical, and I think that would be my preference, but I understand the circumstances where it might not necessarily be to the same caliber of being a complete technical foul. When it comes to a flop, obviously it's not has the same type of actual violent action within it, and violent being in quotation marks, what's considered violent, what's not, debates on the person. But I think overall, I still like that the personal foul is attached to it, because now this can kind of incentivize a player to keep doing it, even though it's going to result in a technical foul, and they probably shouldn't unless they want to get chewed out by their coach. That will probably be the case. But I think overall, when you look at it, I like that it's going to be attached to it. So I'm more in preference of the old method, but I do like that a warning is given ahead of time. And some people will say that the warning is kind of pointless because it gives them a freebie. But at the end of the day, sometimes it does look incidental, and there are times where a flop is called when it is not necessarily the case. I've seen it firsthand. It's a hard thing to judge. So let's get everybody on the same page. The first one is a practice, you can call it. It's called a warning. And then we can all understand what that officiating crew and what those players expect is going to be considered a flop, and they can adjust from there for how they play the game. So that's the main one for basketball. There's also a couple different rules that are starting to become with the jerseys, and there's going to be a removal of the restriction that only lettering can be allowed on the front of the jersey. They're now going to be allowing a logo or a mascot displayed on the jersey. This is Rule 344A for those following along in the if you're a law student and want to know and look up some of these rules. The one that I did previously was 449.1. And when it comes to a fake foul or a theatrical movement, as they call it. But back to the uniform, they're allowing schools to wear logos now, which I think will be very interesting. I think the biggest thing and the biggest win when it comes to my perception of it is they're not going to require schools to purchase new uniforms. If they want to keep the classical look, that is perfectly fine. And I am all for the classical look. Just like the lettering, I think it looks great. I think it keeps things simple. If schools want to wear their logo, I think that's cool. I think at the end of the day, we might see a little bit of a move towards the logo, but I don't think it's going to be as big as maybe you would originally thought when this rule was kind of brought up in this idea. So I think this will be very interesting if that will be kind of the case. Moving forward, if you start to see that adjustment. The last main one in basketball, this is the one that everybody has been looking at, and they've debated from now, and they probably will continue to do so until the end of time or when the rule is changed. And I really do think it's going to change. The shot clock in high school basketball. Here is what is being discussed by the NFHS, and this could go through. This is Rule 910-1A for those that are following along, and this is an edit to what was previously Rule 410. Rule 410 is the 5-second rule for stalling, dribbling out, and not having an action within the contest, right? So you might be trying to waste time. You're moving the ball around. You're staying in one spot. You can't stay in one spot for 5 seconds, and you have to make an action in a basketball move to avoid an action of stalling. 910-1A is saying, you know what? We'll remove it. Okay. But here is the catch. We're going to add the shot clock. We'll finally do it. 35-second shot clock is right now what is being talked about. College is at 30 seconds. National Basketball Association and professional basketball is at 24 for those in reference. So that is what they're talking about right now, and I think this will be very interesting. Am I all for the shot clock? Yes and no. I think I'm in the personal preference for a shot clock overall. I think it just would make the game a lot more competitive down the stretch. And I think there'd be a lot of great opportunities to see great ball games. So I think 35-second shot clock, it seems fair. I would even argue up to 40 seconds is fine on my behalf, because you also do want the standard of really putting together the fundamentals of basketball. And you don't necessarily want to try to shoehorn. I'm all for not going into a 20 to 25 second shot clock. I think that's ridiculous for the high school level, because I know some people have been talking about it. 40 seconds to 35 seconds, that is an okay time for me. Some would argue up to 45. Some would even go up to a minute. I'm not going to go that far. I think 35 is a good amount of time, and I think it gives you a chance to run 1, 2, even 3 sets in a possession, and it keeps the fundamentals of high school basketball moving, and I think that's an important part of it. We'll transition into baseball now. We'll get to one here and then catch a quick break, pay some commercials, and come right back with more. One that I think is very interesting. This is Rule 1-3-2C1. Yes, it's a mouthful even for me to say over the airwaves, but one of them is allowing grips on non-wood bats, and now adds the clarification that resin, pine tar, and a drying agent can be applied to the bat but not exceed 18 inches from the base of the knob. In addition, players will have more grip control on their bats. It will be the same standards used as wood bats. Thumbs up for me. I think it's great. I know there's going to be a lot of talk about there's going to be taken advantage of, but I think the ability to use grips, and especially in a state like Michigan where we're going to have super hot temperatures, then it's going to rain. Every single thing against grip that Mother Nature can throw our way is always thrown at us. So I think that's a really good point to bring up, and I think this is a good move going forward. Well, we're going to take a quick break. More on this subject, as well as other baseball rules and other sports, coming up after this here on News Radio WBRN. We're back here on the West Michigan Sports Show, presented by Dazos Digital. We're talking rules at the National Federation high school level. If you're just joining us, we talked about basketball as well as a little bit of baseball before the break. If you missed out on those, be sure to go online to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on WBRN.com. You can catch the whole thing there and catch up to speed on the ones you may have missed if you're just joining us live over the airwaves. But we're in the middle of baseball, and one talks about forfeitures, right? We don't like talking about games being canceled due to some reasons and due to some reasons beyond control. But this one's very interesting in the sport of baseball. This one goes with Rule 441, which outlines the conditions that can result in a forfeit or a team, including the failure to remove an ejected coach or team personnel from the game, is now going to be a reason that an umpire may force a team to forfeit. Previously, it was only an ejected player that was listed. If an ejected player will not leave, game is forfeited, right? Now it's the coach too, which I think we can all agree is fair. If a coach does not leave the facility, then they have been ejected. That is obviously a security concern, number one. Number two, it is really taking away focus from the game, and we don't want that to be a distraction, okay? And I think that's really one of the big things that is starting to really go around the emotional, around the emotions around the game, I should say, the emotional attachment to the game itself. So I think this is appropriate. I really do. I think it is a little bit one that's going to be maybe talked about a little bit more in depth. But I think at the end of the day, I think we can all agree that that's something that you kind of should expect. And if it is something that can't be handled professionally, then the game is just going to be canceled here and there. And I think that's an unfortunate kind of where we've come to this decision. But it's one that you just have to make for the benefit of everybody moving forward. Moving into high school soccer now. This one has got a couple of rule changes in there, quite a bit that have a lot of jargon in them. So I'm going to try my best to really kind of solidify and really kind of try my best to at least simplify. Obviously, there's going to be some things that I miss. But this is one that really, if you haven't played soccer, you might not understand. You might have watched and you might have an idea. But here, I'm going to read to you the official jargon, I should say, the official verbiage, sometimes I call it jargon, of what this kind of means. So this is Rule 12-7 in high school soccer, which states, It defines what a promising attack is, how to determine a promising attack, and any punishments a player may receive. The new language states that a promising attack is an attack moving quickly with the promise or potential to become a clear goal-scoring opportunity for the attacking team. A promising attack can occur anywhere on the field. When determining if an attack is promising, the following considerations will include, but are not limited to, the distance between the offense and the goal, general direction of play, likelihood of keeping or gaining control of the ball. If the attacking team is moving forward with speed, open space in front of the player or ball, presence of other attackers around that can receive the ball, as well as taking on a defender or to pass a teammate to get by a defender to open up an opportunity with the assistance of teammates. That was a lot. Here's what this means, at least to my understanding. If a foul is to occur that stops an attack, and you can consider this in what would be considered an intentional foul in basketball, or a blatant foul, kind of in a loose term in some other sports used, that will create a different kind of foul that is determined by the officials moving forward. And if it were to be in timing, and with this definition, there's a lot of pro teams you can see with extra time that referees allow an extra opportunity if they get through the 90 minutes, 4 minutes is added on, they're at 94 minutes, but one team that is down a goal is attacking and has a chance to tie it up. They let it play through. So if that were to occur, obviously high school right now has a set, if I'm understanding correctly, a set time, at least it was when I played and based on the information that I have. If that were to change, obviously this would come into play as well. But how they are going to award fouls is obviously this promising attack rule allows that. It's not necessarily going to change the foul structure, but it adds a little bit to the consideration of moving up to a booking or what is called a yellow or red card. When you're looking at the foul, basically determining now what the official language could be towards what would be considered an intentional foul when a team has an opportunity to score and the defense is doing whatever they can to stop that play at that time. So that's kind of what they're talking about in this sense. I think this is overall a very meh rule, right? I'm putting my hands right in the middle of the scale, up to down, just because there's a lot of jargon in there, and how much it really impacts is actually not as much as it sounds. But I think that there's a lot for it moving forward if we continue to look at it. But I think it'll be very interesting just to see what that classification for assessing discipline will entail in the first year that this is kind of brought about. One other rule, especially really to mention quickly, and I think this is kind of obvious, and now we can understand really what is something that is simple, an easy rule change that we can all agree with. Rule 4-1-4D, saying that if tape or a similar material is applied to socks above the ankle, it should be the same color as the area of the sock that it's applied. Referees are no longer to require it to oversee socks below the ankle. I think that's a very fair statement when it comes to just the way that we are approaching uniforms. If you have white socks, don't put on black tape on top. It's a little confusing, and it can be an eye glare when you're looking at it from an official's perspective. So I think that's how it's fair. You can still wear tape. It's 100% fine. Just make sure it's the same color. And I think you're going to see a lot more of this kind of unification, a little play on words there, for a lot of these jerseys and uniforms moving forward. Another change in soccer, the last one here, which I think is very interesting, and this kind of goes along with where we were before. This is Section 8 of Rule 12, and this is also in the fouls and misconduct rule, including ejections. So we have a new article that was added to clarify that there must be an all necessary conditions set met for denying an obvious goal-scoring opportunity. So very similar to what we were talking about before. This now states if any element in Article 1 is missing, the player cannot be ejected. However, this may indicate that an attack is promising and additional factors should be considered. Add on, end quote, in the consideration of assessing and discipline against a goal or goal-scoring opportunity. Very confusing there, but basically what it is saying now is this will add to, we were talking about bookings before, now we're talking about more strict ejections. So basically these rules jumbled together are basically saying that the officials are now have not necessarily a gray area, that may have criteria put together that are met to define what is a clear advantage offensive scoring opportunity. And if a foul occurs, that is blatant and even is occurred in that moment, it's going to be treated differently than it would be than a normal foul. And that will now lead to more pressure towards ejections, more pressure towards bookings due to the impact it has on the game. That's really all it means moving forward. And that's really all it should kind of be looked at as of now. So those are really kind of the main ones there in the sport of soccer. We'll finish up here on the gridiron with football, and we'll try to get to some more of these rules maybe a couple weeks down the road when we have another episode to be able to go through them. But here are some of the ones that are being assessed for football, and majority of them are now uniform requirements. We talked a little bit about the MHSA rule changes in the MHSA in the Michigan area, and those obviously have differentiation with other states. Here's a uniform change. This is Rule 151B, which was recommended by the Rules Committee. And this basically says that home jerseys are the jerseys of the home team, and it shall be a dark color that clearly contrasts white. This revised rule will state now that the jerseys shall all be the same dark colors that clearly contrast white. Your home uniform should not be gray. That's really kind of what this means, right? It shouldn't be a cream. It should not be a light gray. It shouldn't be a silver. It should be a darker color, right? And this, I believe, is required when it comes to your school picking a color set. There must be a distinct, I believe, a white coloration. There should be a dark coloration, and then you can obviously add a third and a fourth color based on what your school wants, but there should be a dark and a light color, right? And most of the times that it is white, and then it will be the other color that is assessed. So maybe it's other times it's black. In a lot of cases, it is black for a lot of schools, and then obviously the aways would be white, but then you have your other colors as well, your blues and your yellows and maybe even your grays. But they're saying you should not have to think about who the home team is. And for an audience that watches football, I can't agree more that yes, that should be absolutely, I should not have to worry about who the home team is when I'm going to a football game. Shouldn't happen, right? It makes perfect sense. So that's basically the rule. They've had some interesting debacles with that. And I know some teams want to necessarily wear white at home. That's a whole nother a discrepancy, but they're now just saying, nope, home can't be white. Make it something that is distinctively contrasting than white. And it makes sense at the end of the day. So that's kind of where that's at. And believe it or not, that's the only football rules change that has officially been ratified this year. They have about 8 or 9 different proposals that they're talking about. The majority of them, I will say, based on research and what I've read, they are involving dead ball fouls. So very similar to soccer, be on the lookout in football that they're going to start hammering down on unsportsmanlike. They are going to throw more flags. They are going to put together more of a structure to define these fouls. And it's unfortunate that we have to come to this to be able to regulate it and discipline correctly. But that now will be in consideration for what is considered legal, what is considered illegal, what is unsportsmanlike in one category as opposed to another. And they're probably going to start cracking down on a lot of these rules. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you for listening in here on the West Michigan Sports Show presented by Bezos Digital. Big thanks to our sponsors and big thanks to you, the listener. We'll be back with another episode here coming up in the 4th of July. Might be a little earlier in the week when we officially release it, but it'll still be here on 3:33 p.m. sharp here on News Radio WBRN. So you can subscribe, hit that preset button, get that station dialed in so you don't miss out. And if you do miss out, don't worry. We got you covered. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you can follow the show for whenever we drop an episode. Brandon Wirth signing off here on the West Michigan Sports Show. Big thanks to everybody. Have a happy 4th of July, and we'll see you back here next week or beyond right here on the home of the West Michigan Sports Show, WBRN.